Hail to thee, my kindred. I hope you're all having a wonderful morning, afternoon, evening, and night, wherever and whenever you are. May the OBS have finally ceased its shenanigans once again. It's just that time for it. And it was very annoying to not have... I wish there was a way to know whether your bandwidth is just gonna act a fool or not. I suppose technically there is by just doing a little test stream, but I don't have time to do a test stream before a stream. You know, that doesn't really make sense. Not unless I want to spend the last 10 minutes of my prep time, I guess, doing a little test stream, in which case I suppose that could benefit me, actually. I'll think on that. What are we doing today? Today, we're just gonna be watching a video, maybe two. I'm not too sure how many. It depends how things go, because I kind of want to learn about philosophy. I know a little bit about philosophy. I've watched things on and on about philosophy. We got Camus. We got Marcus Aurelian. We got... Yeah, those are the only two that come to the top of my head. I know the third guy, but I don't remember his name. He's the, Nietzsche, right? Nihilist guy. Camus is absurdist. Marcus Aurelian, I think, is it Marcus? Actually, it might be someone else. Let me double check. Marcus Aurelius. Why did I say Aurelian? Aurelius. Yes, okay, he's the Stoic. Those are the main three I know of. There's a lot more. There's always more. There's unfortunately too many old dead men that talk about a lot of things. Dostoevsky? I remembered him. Because like I said, I think a stream or two ago, this technically isn't my first rodeo of trying to do this. Let's see if I actually stick to it this time around. Let's see if there's any interest or intrigue or anything of the sort, really. I might continue it even if there's not. I'm not too sure just yet. First video we're gonna watch is just gonna be like a... What's it called? It's literally just called Philosophy for Beginners by Jared Henderson. I don't know whether Jared has good stuff or not when it comes to his videos. I've never seen him. I hope he does. I just sort of need something that'll give me the first couple of steps. Maybe there's some things I've lacked the understanding of. Some very basic ideas. I don't know. I never know. I don't know until I figure out whether I know a thing or I don't. I know if he's gonna go over some terms in that video, which would be helpful. I don't know if he's gonna give straight up recommendations, and even if he does, I don't know if we'll use them. To be fair, I sort of don't know how to continue from this point after today. If I decide to keep doing this, I may just keep watching videos on different guys and different, things. I do run the what's the way I want to put this? The risk of sort of just sitting down and watching something and just letting that thing play, which would not be good because then that would be not entertaining. So just sit down, watch a video in complete silence, and make zero comments on it. Because it's one thing to watch something funny and then, comment on that. It's another thing to to try and sit down and watch something a little more educational, and because I don't know anything about it, to attempt to make comments on it. Like, that just seems like a bit of a recipe for disaster, but we'll see how it goes. Oh, I also remember, I guess Socrates was also a philosopher, right? There was Socrates, there's the homeless guy who was not very chill with him, if I'm remembering people in the correct order. The one that came into the room with like a unfeathered chicken and said, "Behold a man." Funny guy. Don't know if their ways of thinking have names or if they're just literally named after, the people themselves, the men themselves. We'll see. We'll see at some point or another. Obviously, they're not the only ones. I'm generally focusing my learning, or most of my knowledge anyways, of what little I know is mainly Western philosophy, because, I don't know if you've noticed, but I don't speak non-Western languages. So you can assume I don't necessarily come from non-Western places. It would not make sense for me to start with Taoism or something like that. Although it would be maybe a little interesting to get to at some point down the line. Who knows? I might also just decide to get a snack or something. And I'll probably open up the notes app here so that I can maybe write a couple of things down here and there. Do I know how to spell? There we go. Philosophy is always like a hard word to spell. I'll keep this little notes app thing open for myself. You won't be able to see it. I don't even know how to make you see it. I think it's probably just by using one of the things here, but it's whatever. It's whatever. Tis whatever. This stream will probably be just like 2 hours. Nothing too crazy. Nothing too crazy. Like I said, maybe one video, maybe two. Just meh. Let me just make sure it's all on the right stuff. That goes there. This goes here. Volume. I think that should be fine. It might be kind of loud, or maybe not loud enough. I won't know until somebody comes in here and judges me. I should probably... I don't know whether to, Oh, wrong thing. Incidentally clicked on the side. Should I leave it like that, or... Let's see. The hell's default view. I don't want default view. I think like this is good enough, right? This is good enough. Let's move on. This is not... I just realized how this man looks at the beginning of his video. This is not a very pleasing, not a very picturesque look for a man. But you know what? It's not my fault. Neither is it his fault that I just decided to pause at the 1 second mark.
Learn about philosophy, and
Nope.
I did what I think
Nope.
a lot of people...
Nope. Okay, there we go. Let's
When I was
start.
still in high school, I decided I wanted to learn about philosophy, and I did what I think a lot of people would think is natural. I went to a bookstore, and then I just found some books that I wanted to read. Of course, that meant that when I came home, I had 2 books, and it was The Birth of Tragedy by Friedrich Nietzsche and Introduction to Metaphysics by Martin Heidegger. If you know anything about philosophy, I think...
Wait, is it metaphysics math? I thought metaphysics was like a math thing, not a philosophy thing, although maybe it's like a bit of both. A mixture, per se.
You know that was probably not the ideal way to start. I didn't have any sense of what basic terms meant. I just knew that philosophy sounded like something that was interesting and something I wanted to spend some time on, but I was going in totally blind. So if
You
you're...
should probably make the captions a bit smaller. Is there a way to do that? Because I'd like to have them on, because I know some people like them on. Options, font size, let's say like 70 something. 75% I think is fine. There we go, yeah.
in a position where you want to start reading some philosophy, but you don't even know what the basic landscape of philosophy is like, this is the video for you. This is my sort of beginner's guide to philosophy. This is not a list of recommended readings. I've done that a couple of times. I'll link them down below.
Okay, there we go. So recommended readings, we'll check out whatever's in the description a little bit later after this video. Good thing that he's made it clear what this is and what this is for. Makes my life a little bit easier.
Instead, this is a tour through 5 major areas of philosophy. And those areas are logic, metaphysics, epistemology, ethics, and political philosophy.
Okay, I don't think I've ever heard of epistemology at least once in my life. That sounds made up. But, maybe philosophy in its entirety is just a made up thing. That you could argue that.
Now, if you're someone who would click on a video like this, it's because you like to learn things, and you probably like to learn things in a free and easy way. And I want to take just a moment to tell you about today's sponsor. Brilliant.
Sponsorships.
Brilliant is a great way for you to learn about math and computer
Brilliant
science.
is like
You can
everywhere.
work on general science and engineering skills, some of those
I hope
programming
it doesn't
skills you've been
become
wanting
one of
to develop,
those
or maybe some data analytics.
one of
And
those
Brilliant sets us
places
up
that
so you
has
can learn these things
some
in about
secret
15
evil.
minutes a day. I left academia after getting my PhD, started working at tech companies, and one of the things I didn't learn to do when I was working on my philosophy
my
PhD
brain.
was learn about data analytics or to learn skills like Python. And those kind of skills, though, are incredibly useful if you're trying to branch out. Now, if you're interested in Brilliant, they are offering a 20% discount to the first 200 subscribers who use my link. That is brilliant.org/Jared Henderson.
I do
That's
wonder how
20%
much money
off
these
for the
like
first 200
random little learning
subscribers.
sites
And you
get.
get a
I say
30-day
that as if
free
there's more than Brilliant. I mean, I don't know if there is. There could be. Obviously, there's things like Duolingo, but Brilliant seems more like math oriented. So there you have it. I've never heard of any other math oriented learning thing. I suppose they probably do a lot more than just math. To be fair.
trial with Brilliant. So thank you again to Brilliant for sponsoring this video. Now, when I talk about philosophy, I usually like to start by talking about logic. The study of logic can be broken up really into 2 major categories. The first category is about the art of thinking and about becoming a better thinker. One of the best examples of that from the history of philosophy is this 17th century book by Arnaud and Nicole called Logic or the Art of Thinking. This book was actually intended as a kind of manual to help you become a more rational thinker. Arnaud and Nicole are trying to help the reader train themselves so that they can have more true beliefs while also avoiding false beliefs. And
I feel like that's got to be a weird read. Just specifically, here's how to think. You don't know how to think? Come read our book. It'll teach you how to think. As if people, I mean, I suppose there is like a certain logic to their method rather than just the standard way of thinking. I do wonder what made those two decide to write such a story, or not a story, such a book, I should say. Like, what was the environment? Like, what was going on? What exactly made them think they had to write this thing down so that, like what were they trying to solve? Or was it just they just felt like it, They just felt like it. They had similar ideas. They said, you know what? We need to write this down, and then they wrote it down. Yeah.
there's a lot of value in what Arnaud and Nicole are trying to do. You could go and try and read that book yourself, but I think most of us would probably want a bit more of a modern update. And this is really the topic that you would find discussed in textbooks that fall under the heading of critical thinking. And if you've spent any time on the internet around philosophy or critical thinking, then you've probably encountered a couple of the basic concepts, like fallacies. You might have even seen a YouTube video where someone tried to give a quick list of 19 fallacies and also accidentally said that Richard Nixon walks on the moon, and the comment section let him know that he made a mistake. Who knew? Fallacies, really simply put, are bad patterns of reasoning. It's not that every fallacious argument has a wrong or false conclusion. It's that the kind of reasoning that's being employed in a fallacious argument is not the kind of reasoning that will reliably take you from truth to truth. So here's a quick example. This is the fallacy of guilt by association. This is probably the internet's favorite fallacy.
Hate that one. I've heard of fallacies before, and definitely this one. Despise this one. You see it all over the place. It is annoying to see people try to lecture one another over who they follow on any given on any given thing, as if following a person means you agree with every single word that's come out of their mouth. Hi, I don't even know how you get people to not think like that, but And that is certainly a fallacy. Good thing he shows that one because I know at least a lot of scenarios in which that has happened.
So suppose that we have two friends, Arthur and Buster, and they've decided to have a debate about vaccines. Suppose that Arthur holds the belief that vaccines cause autism. Now, Arthur is wrong about this, and Buster needs to figure out how he can argue against Arthur and try to convince him. One of the ways he could do this is talk about the different studies that show that there really isn't much evidence that supports any kind of causal link between vaccines and autism. But sometimes Buster maybe gets a little ahead of himself, and he says instead that you shouldn't believe that because crazy and bad people like Alex Jones believe that. Notice here that even if Buster is correct about vaccines not causing autism, he's still made a bad argument. The truth is that bad
So,
people and
Cal, hail to thee. How are you doing? Today we're doing something a little bit different. Just a smidge different. We're trying to learn. We're trying to become learned men, so to speak. Where's my coin? I had my coin somewhere around here. I somehow have lost my coin. Oh no. I just realized my coin is not here. Oh, there it is. Never mind. I'm just blind. It was hiding behind another object. But how are you? How's your Monday going so far? I have a headache. That's how my Monday is going so far. Brain is telling me ouchie. For no discernible reason.
sometimes even crazy people have true beliefs. So just associating a belief with a bad person
Aw,
isn't
blessed
enough.
and same. You're finding it hard to get out of this bed. I hope that it eventually is possible for you to get out of bed. You don't gotta rush it. You don't gotta rush it. But you do have to get out of bed eventually.
Enough to show that the belief is false. The point is pretty simple. If you want to figure out if a belief is true or false, you need to focus on the relevant kind of evidence. And just like the fact that good people believe something doesn't make it true, bad people believing something also doesn't make it false. So if you understand logic this way, I think you can see how it's going to help make you a better thinker. You're going to learn about good reasoning, whether deductive, inductive, or abductive. And
Okay, notes to write down. Let me write that down on my notes, even though that's pretty straightforward. Critical thinking. Okay, what was one of the things he said? Fallacies, right? So he's mainly sticking to fallacies. He's still got a little bit more to go. I'm actually gonna let that roll
you don't really
before
need to
writing
use
something down.
formal logical tools in order to learn this stuff. It can also go really nicely with some more modern psychology. In the last couple of decades, psychologists have become very interested in cognitive biases. Now, some of the research on cognitive biases proved to not be nearly as robust as we had previously believed, particularly the work on implicit bias that really did not hold up to replication. But there are still well documented and well supported cognitive biases, which are basically these bad heuristics that we tend to naturally do in order to determine if something is true or false.
I don't even know what heuristics means. Hold on, give me 1 second on that one, because I want to know what that means. Heuristics. Of or relating to a usual speculative formulation serving as a guide in the investigation or solution of a problem, of or constituting an educational method in which learning takes place through discoveries that result from investigations made by the student or relating to or using a problem solving technique in which the most appropriate solution of several found by alternative methods is selected at successive stages of a program for use in the next step of a program. Okay, so it just has to do with just different approaches to solving some problem. That's as much as I understand so far. Okay, moving on.
Learning about cognitive biases is a lot like learning about fallacies. The more you learn about them, the more you can try and recognize them in your own thinking, and the better kind of thinker you're going to become. And this is going to help you when you're studying philosophy, but it's also really going to help you when you study absolutely anything. This is one of the reasons that I bring it up at the beginning of this video, and why I think it's an important way to start your philosophical journey. Now, the second way of understanding logic is as a formal or mathematical system.
Okay, this is like a next part. So, first part was basically just fallacies. And cognitive bias. So let's write that down. Fallacies and cognitive bias. There we go. I don't know how to spell cognitive, apparently. I'm surprised I knew how to spell fallacies. Okay, spelling. Cognitive. There we go. He said something else as well. I kind of forgot what it was. I'll roll back eventually.
We have a precedent of this in the history of philosophy as well. While formal mathematical logic really becomes its own kind of subject in maybe, say, the 19th century, in the medieval world, we had incredibly robust logical analysis. And medieval logicians were really worried about the structure of argument in the way that contemporary mathematical logicians are. Even if you go back to Aristotle, we're talking about the form of argument rather than the content of argument, which is that first distinction you need if you're going to study formal logic. When most philosophers today talk about logic, they are talking about formal logic, so logic in our second sense, and not that first sense in making you a better thinker. So the study of formal logic really...
Okay, formal logic. Very different from what I understand. Let me write that down. Formal logic. Focused on structure.
started to flourish in the 19th and 20th centuries. And one of the key figures for this is Gottlob Frege. Frege was the inventor of something called the Begriffsschrift. This translates to a concept script from German. His idea was to create a formal notation which could represent arguments, especially the kinds of arguments that you would find in mathematics. So logicians would actually translate arguments into this formal representation, and then using well-defined rules try to assess whether or not they were valid or invalid. It can feel tedious to try to spell out all of these rules, but this level of precision is useful for the sort of work that logicians want to do.
I don't like the idea that they got math involved in this. I did not do well with learning math at all. This worries me. Somehow, math is related. There we go. Added that extra little bit to my notes.
Formal logic really originally was supposed to provide a grounding for all of mathematics, but this actually proved a little bit difficult due to things like Russell's paradox and Gödel's incompleteness theorem. So Russell's paradox showed an essential contradiction in Frege's system. It actually showed that Frege made inconsistent assumptions as he was laying out his entire formal system. And then Gödel's incompleteness theorem shows that there are some truths of mathematics which cannot be proven. But formal logic is not only useful because it could provide a grounding for mathematics. It's also useful for our kind of precise modeling of other philosophically interesting concepts. And that's why we have modal logics, temporal logics, epistemic logics, fuzzy logics, and so on. Some philosophers also spend their time thinking about...
Did he say fuzzy logic? What is fuzzy logic even supposed to be? Not fuzzy logic. Let me look that one up too. Just because it sounds funny. Fuzzy logic. Let me see if I can find a quick definition. It's a form of many-valued logic in which the truth value of variables may be any number between 0 and 1. Once again, I do not understand why math is involved. A form of algebra employing a range of values. Okay, so it's some kind of algebra. That's all I need to know.
Paradoxes. And a paradox is where we get an absurd conclusion from plausibly true premises and reliable inference rules. They seem to show us that there's a problem with the way we think about reasoning. Here's a famous example, the liar's paradox. So consider the sentence, "This sentence is false." Now let's ask ourselves an obvious question. So is that sentence true or false? If you say that it's false, then the sentence is true, because after all, it says of itself that it's false, and it's false, so it's true. That's absurd, right? But if it is true, then we get the inverse reasoning. Since it says of itself that it's false, and we've supposed that it's true, then it actually describes itself incorrectly. And a sentence that describes itself incorrectly is false.
So basically just bullshit. This sentence is bullshit, is what this really means.
which again is absurd. The liar traps us in a kind of pattern of circular reasoning. We can go back and forth concluding that it's true, and then it's false, and it's true, and then it's false. And if you accept some common inference rules like modus ponens, you actually get to this principle called explosion. The idea behind the principle of explosion is that when you've arrived at a contradiction, you can actually prove any sentence at all. And that obviously is absurd. Not every sentence is true. So paradoxes tell us something important, but actually figuring out what they tell us about our language or about our logic is a matter of debate. I didn't even bother to count how many different kinds of solutions to the paradoxes there are on offer, but I would guess probably in the hundreds, at least when it comes to theories, when you look at all the variants and subvariants of the solutions. So to say that there's any kind of consensus, I think, would be an overstatement. So logicians study good thinking and the laws of logic, but metaphysicians study the nature of reality itself. Metaphysicians debate top.
Metaphysicians study logic in nature, or something like that. Metaphysicians. Let me roll back. I want to hear exactly how he worded it.
An overstatement. So logicians study good thinking and the laws of logic, but metaphysicians study the nature of reality itself.
Okay, nature of reality. Pretty straightforward. Metaphysics itself, not so much, you know?
Metaphysicians debate topics like truth, identity, endurance, necessity, contingency, the existence of God, the relationship between the mental and the physical. Those are just the topics that I could think of off the top of my head, actually. For a short video like this, we're just going to focus on two of the big issues that we've seen in the history of philosophy, and those are the nature of truth and the problem of universals. So probably from the very beginning of philosophy, philosophers have felt like they had to say something about truth and to tell you what it is. But for a very long time, they never felt like they had to go into tremendous detail. Truth was sort of just taken for granted as a kind of obvious or simple concept. So they didn't actually tell us much about the nature of truth. There's a quote from Aristotle in the Metaphysics where he gives a little definition of truth that actually is pretty straightforward. So Aristotle writes, "To say of what is that it is not, or of what is not that it is false. While to say of what it is that it is, and of what is not that it is not, is true." Aristotle.
What kind of... What? What is that entire sentence? To say of what is that it is not, or of what is not that it is false. Okay, I'm gonna try to understand this. What is that it is not? To say of what it is that it is not. Man, old people writing. It was certainly something else. And then, of what is not that it is.
Is, and of what is not that it is not, is true. Aristotle seems to have inherited that definition from Plato, and basically he's just giving you the conditions under which something is true or false. That doesn't actually tell us much about the nature of the property of truth, and eventually philosophers felt like they had to give a theory of truth. And a couple of theories emerged as like the main contenders. The correspondence theory of truth says that a sentence is true when it corresponds to reality. This seems to be really similar to what Plato and Aristotle would have said about truth. This view is often associated with another view in metaphysics called realism, which is the belief that there are mind-independent truths. So truths that we don't make true with our minds, but rather we discover. I would say that probably this is the most popular view of truth. Most philosophers would defend this view, including me, by the way. I wrote my dissertation on the nature of truth, and I did not start off wanting to defend a correspondence theory. I had alternative ideas, but by the end, I ended up offering a kind of novel version of a correspondence theory of truth in my dissertation. So I do have some skin in this game. The verification theory of truth says that a sentence is true when it has been verified.
Okay. I'm gonna need to re-listen to that whole bit right there.
Called realism, which is the belief that there are mind-independent truths. So
Okay, so realism is mind-independent truths. So what that means, I hope he... maybe I'll have to do my own research on that. equals mind independent truths. I mean, I know he kind of says kind of what it is, but
Truths that we don't make true with our minds, but rather we discover. I would say that probably this is the
so truths we discover. I feel like that's kind of iffy, but what do I know?
most popular view of truth. Most philosophers would defend this view, including me, by the way. I wrote my dissertation on the nature of truth, and I did not start off wanting to defend a correspondence theory. I had alternative ideas, but by the end, I ended up offering a kind of novel version of a correspondence theory of truth in my dissertation. So I do have some skin in this game. The verification theory of truth says that a sentence is true when it has been verified. The verification theory is often associated with anti-realism. And according to this view, before something has been verified, it's neither true nor false. This view was actually pretty popular in the 20th century, partly due to the influence of a philosopher named Michael Dummett. But it was never really
Not
the
Dummett.
dominant view. Related to the verification theory of truth is the pragmatist theory of truth, which says that when we say a belief is true, what we're really saying is that it's useful for achieving our practical ends. This does seem like another anti-realist theory of truth, but it has nothing to do with verification in this case. And it's more about the utility of certain beliefs.
So basically, just bullshitting your way into getting what you want. Are we learning philosophy today? We are, and it's already confusing. It is very confusing. I'm trying to understand whatever little concepts they're throwing my way here, and so far, I don't understand all that much. So, can we really say that I am learning anything? How are you doing, though, Shoko? How are you doing? I hope your day's going all right. You were sadly sleeping through your philosophy lectures. Well then, may you sleep through these as well.
This is closely associated with the American pragmatists like C.S. Peirce and William James and John Dewey. The final prominent theory of truth would be the coherence theory, which says that a sentence is true just when it coheres with some privileged set of beliefs. Now, this view is associated with another metaphysical view called idealism. Idealism is the view that all of reality fundamentally is mental. Idealism is close.
Okay, idealism. Let me write that down. I also have been pausing quite a lot. So that's just to write down little notes here and there. Reality is fundamentally mental. There we go.
Mostly associated with a lot of different German philosophers, probably most famously Kant and Hegel. And
Not Kant and
coherence theory
Hegel.
of truth has been attributed to Hegel, though I have read some.
What's the reason? The reason for what? Me writing down notes? It's just so that I can have something to reference whenever I decide to try and do my own little learning off stream, because I don't know if I'm gonna do this for many more streams. I just need a little bit of set of words, and I need to understand what those words mean so that I know what people are referencing. Why are we sinking into a subject? Oh, why are we... Okay, now I just don't understand your question. Ask again. Input not understood. Words. Me and words. Why learning philosophy today? Want to be smart. That's why. For the funnies. For the hee hee ha ha's. For the why not. You know? 'Cause why not? What else do I have to do with my time? Absolutely nothing. So I may as well.
Scholarly work that disputes whether or not Hegel actually has a coherence theory of truth, but there are later idealists, like the British idealist F.H. Bradley, who seems to definitely hold a coherence theory of truth. And then you have to mention this one weird view that popped up in the 20th century, but has really been prominent in discussions of truth since then, and that's the deflationary theory of truth. This
Okay, deflationary theory. That sounds dumb. But sure. Deflationary theory of truth. Want to be smart? Shouldn't we start with something less complicating? Additional addition and subtraction. Listen, I already failed math. I can't do that. I can't do that, okay? It's too hard. There's already math in this as well, okay? It hurts to know that. It hurts to know there's math involved somehow in logic.
This theory of truth really took off, I think, with the logical positivist, and is associated with a book called Language, Truth, and Logic by A.J. Ayer, but has also been defended by philosophers like Paul Horwich and a bunch of others in the 20th century. And the deflationist theory of truth says that truth isn't a property that has a nature. They deflate the whole concept. And in fact, truth is kind of like the word and. It plays a logical or functional role in our language, but it doesn't pick out anything significant in the world. Now, that's
I don't even know what that means. What does that entire sentence mean? Well, there are letters in math. It's only fair. I don't know, Shoko.
says that truth isn't a property that has a nature.
Okay, not a property that has a nature. So truth isn't a property that has a nature. He says that so casually.
deflate the whole concept. And in fact, truth is kind of like the word and. It plays a logical or functional role in our language, but it doesn't pick out anything significant in the world. Now, that's a quick introduction to truth, so let's move on really quickly to talk about universals. So we can divide the world into two categories, individuals and universals. We'll actually use some examples to make this a little bit clearer, and let's talk about my cats. So I have two black cats, Carl and Bark.
Carl and Bark. I like Bark a little. I like that photo particularly.
We'll use some examples to make this a little bit clearer, and let's talk about my cats. So I have two black cats, Carl.
Look at Carl in the sunlight, majestic,
and Bark.
And then Bark, who looks like he's out of it. I don't know. There's something about that look in his face. I like the little red scarf thing though.
Yes, the second one is named Bark, like the sound a dog makes. My wife thought it would be funny. So both Carl and Bark are individuals. So they are discrete and distinct things. They exist out in the world. We could be more specific and say they are concrete individuals. So they're distinct things that we can interact with physically and directly. But they also seem to have some things in common, namely they're both black and they're both cats. So when we say that they're both cats, what we're doing is classifying Carl and Bark. We're saying that they both belong to this common class of cats. And there are things that are not in the class of cats, like this bottle.
If you're a certain kind of philosopher,
you might ask,
cat is not bottle, bottle is not cat. Remember that, okay? Do not forget that. Universality. I feel like universality is pretty straightforward, to be fair, at least in a very basic way. It's just things that are kinda true all around. Cats have 4 legs. That's kinda true. Unless a cat was born without a leg or was in an accident.
Why is that? For some philosophers, the answer is that Carl and Bark both instantiate a common property, which we'll call a universal. And that is they both instantiate or participate in the universal of cat. Well, let's call it cattiness. Carl and Bark both instantiate the universal of being a cat, and this bottle doesn't. That explains why.
Or met a mad scientist and now have 5 legs. True.
Is closely associated with Plato, who gave his theory of forms. So forms are just Plato's word for universals. For Plato, the forms are timeless and eternal and unchanging, and they live in this kind of other realm. We actually call it the Platonic realm in philosophy. So the Platonic forms are actually treated as abstract objects. Now, Aristotle actually agreed that there were universals, but he disagreed that they had to exist abstractly. Instead, he thought that they existed in the objects which instantiated them. So Plato and Aristotle both agree that there are universals. They just disagree about the details of the theory. But there are some philosophers who say that there's no such thing as universals or properties, and maybe they even go further and say no such thing as abstract objects.
Okay.
And we call those philosophers nominalist. So some philosophers base their arguments for nominalism based on a
Nominalist.
principle of simplicity, which basically says that we should prefer simpler theories if they do the same kind of explanatory work. This is closely associated with a principle of reasoning that we sometimes call Occam's razor, which is associated with the medieval philosopher William of Ockham. Now, William of
William
Ockham
of Ockham.
was a nominalist, but as this article in the Stanford Encyclopedia makes clear, he does not base his argument on his razor, this principle. Instead, William of Ockham wanted to argue directly against the existence of universals. He didn't just think that universals were unnecessary, he thought that universals were incoherent.
That's weird to think about. Just the idea that there's people out there that are like, actually, this sort of rule set is dumb. Why, though? That's my question. Why?
Eventually, Occam says that the only sense in which something universal exists is when there is an act of the mind which thinks of two or more objects. And this is roughly what nominalists tend to say about properties and things. Properties don't exist in the objects or in another realm. They only exist insofar as we sort of make them up as we're classifying objects. So you can find nominalism throughout the history of philosophy and not just in Western philosophy. This is a case where Buddhism is a pretty interesting example. A lot of Buddhist philosophers say that everything is temporary and nothing is eternal. And if everything is temporary and nothing is eternal, then there can't be any kind of universals which exist in some other realm. Certainly the Platonic theory of universals just can't be true because, again, those are supposed to be timeless and unchanging and eternal. If universals are timeless, but everything is temporary, then universals just don't exist. So let's talk about epistemology, which is the study of knowledge. It comes from this Greek word episteme. One of the fundamental questions...
Okay, let me... Hold on. Let me write that down. Epistemology. Epistemology. Study... What did he say? Study of knowledge? You hope so? You hate your job? Hey, maybe you're a Buddhist at heart. Buddhist. Okay, there we go. And I don't know how to spell epistemology, even though it's right there in the video. Study of knowledge.
Of epistemology is what is knowledge? What is the definition or nature of knowledge? And one very old theory
What is
again
thinking?
Can be traced back to Plato. Sometimes we call this theory the JTB theory of knowledge. This theory says that knowledge is justified, true belief. I said this theory could be traced back to Plato, and that's because it's put forward by one of the characters in his dialogue, the Theaetetus. Many philosophers have accepted some version of the JTB theory, but they've typically argued over the nature of justification. And then we also find arguments directly against the JTB theory. In the 20th century, the famous example of this is Edmund Getier's paper. Gettier wrote a paper which outlined a series of cases where the JTB theory would be satisfied, but where we wouldn't say that the people in question knew anything. And mostly all of his cases centered on a kind of epistemic luck. They had justification for their beliefs, and it was true.
What does epistemic mean? Another word I need to look the definition of. Okay. Epistemic definition. Of relating to or involving knowledge, cognitive, of or pertaining to epistemology. Okay. You tell me, this isn't even my first language. Listen, I'm trying to look it up. Okay, so yeah, okay, it's just relating. So, okay, epistematic luck. So, is that just another way of kind of like a roundabout way of saying convenient? Refers to anything related to knowledge or the conditions of acquiring knowledge. Let's just continue. And in the meantime, you're doing Duolingo using your third language. Well, aren't you just a little smarty pants?
True, but the alignment of that justification and the truth, it's just really kind of a matter of luck. And we say that, oh, you just got lucky. It actually really is about as worthwhile as having a lucky guess. And thus, we don't want to say that you really know it. And so the JTB
okay, so Okay, never mind. I don't understand what he has said. Let me go back.
A kind of epistemic luck. They had justification for their beliefs and it was true, but the alignment of that justification and the truth, it's just really kind of a matter of luck. And we say that, oh, you just got lucky. It actually really is about as worthwhile as having a lucky guess. And thus, we don't want to say that you really know it. And so the JTB theory is at best insufficient. Especially in the English speaking world, we've come to call these sorts of cases the Gettier problem. There is one major problem with this, and that's that Gettier didn't actually invent the problem. There seems to be
Why is it called a Gettier problem if the man didn't invent the problems? How's that fair on Gettier?
that an Indian philosopher in the 8th century, Dharmatara, actually raises similar kinds of problems for roughly this theory of knowledge. And there's a similar point that's raised by the 14th century Italian philosopher, Peter of Mantua. But there is a more fundamental epistemological problem. And that's the question of whether or not it's possible to know anything at all.
Oh, not
Some
this
philosophers
again.
throughout history have argued the answer is no. We call them skeptics. And we call them
Okay, skeptics. Skeptics think you can't know shit. How do I spell that? Okay, it's right there. Skeptics. You can't know stuff. That's my note on that.
skeptics. We mean something very different than the modern usage of the term. For some reason, we've decided to call people skeptics if they are basically Richard Dawkins style new atheist or something. Skeptics in the philosophical tradition are typically significantly more radical. Philosophical skeptics tend to deny the possibility of knowledge. One problem that you face if you claim that knowledge is impossible is that someone can ask the kind of smart alecky question, do you know that? If you answer yes, then you've contradicted your own position because you've said knowledge is impossible, but in fact you know something. And if you say no, then it seems like you've undermined your own position because you've actually said that you don't even believe it. This is why skeptics tend to actually try to hedge their position. The Pyrrhonist school of Greek philosophy, whom we mostly know through the later writer Sextus Empiricus, tended to teach their followers to suspend judgment, which is a way of saying to train yourself to not believe anything at all. There's also a variety of
Well, isn't that? I feel like that's rather convenient. Just train yourself. Just don't believe in stuff. Just don't believe in anything. Okay, just sit down, try to figure stuff out, but don't believe in anything. I guess that would make it easier to sort of flow from one way of thinking into another, or, well, I guess. What would be the point of not knowing, of like not believing anything if you're trying to, I don't even know what I'm trying to say. That's how confused I am. All I know is that I'm confused, but can I know that? According to skeptics, no. I don't know whether I'm confused or not.
Skepticism. The academics are the followers of Plato in the classical world, and we can see a little bit of this skepticism in the writings of Cicero. Skepticism can be found in the Buddhist tradition, and it can be found in the Western medieval tradition. For instance, John Duns Scotus and William of Ockham were engaged in a very lively debate about skepticism and the possibility of knowledge. In the modern era, though, we see a slight turn in skepticism. Instead of viewing skepticism as a position which can be occupied, philosophers started to use skepticism and doubt as a kind of tool in their inquiry. The two most famous examples of this would be René Descartes and David Hume. Descartes uses a method of radical doubt. So Descartes is on a quest for certainty. And what he would do is examine all of his beliefs, and if he could find any reason to doubt them, he would discard his beliefs. What he was searching for were those beliefs which he could know with absolute certainty. He had this idea that once you had identified those fixed truths, then you would be able to build an entire system of knowledge using those truths as a foundation. Because of this, we call Descartes' epistemological project foundationalism.
So basically, Descartes, or whatever his name is, it's like, if you know something only 99% of the way, and that 1% makes you doubt, just throw the entire thing out the window. You gotta know something 100%. You can't have a single bit of doubt in this piece of information.
So Descartes uses methodological skepticism to try to identify those foundations. If you know anything about the history of philosophy, then you might have heard the phrase, I think, therefore I am. This is part of Descartes' foundationalist project. He thinks that that is an inference.
You're doubting yourself sometimes? Should you throw yourself over a window? I believe that is not the appropriate not the appropriate solution to your troubles. It was meant more as a metaphor. Metaphorically throw yourself out the window. Not, well, not yourself, your knowledge, what you know, what you believe. Throw the belief out the window. Not, I'm not sure if this applies to oneself. It could, I suppose, in theory, apply to oneself. So if you don't know yourself, I guess just don't believe in yourself? That's the best answer I can give. I apologize.
That he cannot doubt. So the existence of his own mind, which is a thinking thing, proves to be the foundation for Descartes. Descartes would then go on and try to rebuild all of his knowledge. So all of these things that he had previously doubted, like the reliability of our perceptions or the existence of God, he would try to prove using this as a foundation. The other famous modern skeptic would be David Hume, who used his skepticism in a very
I've heard of that name as well, David Hume. I don't remember in what context, though.
different sort of way. Where Descartes was a rationalist who believed in the power of human reason to arrive at knowledge, David Hume believed that all human knowledge was based in experience. When we have an experience, this leaves an impression on the mind. And Hume thought that all of our ideas were built out of these simple impressions. And his idea was to use a kind of skeptical methodology to examine our ideas and see if they could have actually been constructed out of impressions based on experience. And if you could not show that such a construction was possible, then you had to actually discard the belief because it was in fact meaningless. Hume famously doesn't believe in induction, which is the belief that the future will be like the past. And that is because he thinks that experience alone cannot prove it. He doesn't believe in causation because he thinks we cannot form the complex idea based on our experiences. He doesn't even believe in the existence of a stable self from one time to another. So Hume and Descartes are both using skepticism in their philosophical methodologies, but they actually diverge pretty wildly on their conclusions. Now, ethics is the study of right and wrong.
Okay, ethics. Study of right and wrong. I feel like that was pretty straightforward too, at least on a surface level. Let me guess, everybody's gonna be discussing what is right and what is wrong.
There are three major schools of ethics. First, we have the consequentialists. Consequentialists believe that you can assess the rightness or wrongness of an action based on the consequences that it produces. Consequentialists tend to have a theory of value that they add, and that allows you to figure out if a consequence is a good consequence or a bad consequence. For instance, the utilitarians, who are closely associated with Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill or Peter Singer, they have a theory of value, and namely that's hedonism. Hedonism is the belief that all that is good is pleasure and all that is bad is pain. When you add hedonism and consequentialism together, you get utilitarianism, which is the moral theory that says that you ought to maximize pleasure. Then we have the deontologist. Deontologists have a law conception of ethics. Instead of
I need to understand what was freaking consequentialism again.
consequences that it produces, that you can assess the rightness or wrongness of an action based on the consequences that it produces.
Okay. Consequentialist. Assess the right and wrong of something based on consequence.
Consequentialists tend to have a theory of value that they add, and that allows you to figure out if a consequence is a good consequence or a bad consequence. For instance, the utilitarians, who are closely associated with Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill or Peter Singer, they have a theory of value, and namely that's hedonism. Hedonism is the belief that all that is good is pleasure and all that is bad is pain. When you add hedonism and consequentialism together, you get utilitarianism, which is the moral theory that says that you ought to maximize pleasure. Then we have the deontologist. Deontologists have a law conception.
Okay, deontologist. That's a weird word. Oh, I am not being allowed to exist properly. Deontologist. I barely can even write what I wanted to write down. About the utilitarians and hedonism and whatever the hell. Mix of consequentialism and hedonism. So I'm gonna have to explain hedonism, which would be... Oop, wrong thing. Pleasure good. That's hedonism in a nutshell. Pleasure good.
Of ethics. Instead of talking about the rightness or wrongness of particular actions based on their actual consequences, deontologists like to come up with rules for classes of actions. The most famous deontologist is probably Immanuel Kant. Kant believed that moral law could be deduced from the principles of rationality. So all human beings, as rational creatures, were bound by the same moral law. And in fact, the moral law was knowable because we all should have been able to know it in virtue of our own rationality. But the third school of ethics that we will discuss is a little bit different. That's virtue ethics. Instead of thinking about the rightness or wrongness of particular actions, virtue ethics tends to start by talking about the question of character or the development of virtue. I like to say that virtue ethics really is about how to be a good human being. For virtue ethics, the rightness or wrongness of actions is actually a secondary question. We know that if we become virtuous people, we'll typically do the right thing, so we focus on sort of self-development in an ethical manner.
Okay, that one's pretty straightforward, I think, too.
Very popular in ancient Greece and in Rome. You can also find it across the world, especially in the Confucian tradition in Chinese philosophy. You see an emphasis on the development of virtue. The most famous virtue ethicist is probably Aristotle, though. Aristotle wrote this fantastic book, The Nicomachean Ethics, in which outlines a whole theory of virtue and also discusses many of the individual virtues like justice and courage and prudence and temperance. And then eventually it goes on to apply this like to living the good life, the life of contemplation, and also discussing what it means to be a good friend in light of virtue.
Aww.
Aristotle very famously thinks that
that's kind of cute.
People who lack virtue actually can't be friends. But Aristotle's theory of ethics fell out of favor, and I think this is actually part of a larger downfall of Aristotelian thought in the West. But in the late 1950s, G.E. Anscombe published a paper called Modern Moral Philosophy. That paper is highly critical of the ethical theories of the day. That paper, along with works like Alistair MacIntyre's After Virtue, led to a resurgence of interest in virtue ethics in the academy, and you actually see way more working virtue ethicists now. It's certainly a really robust field of ethics in contemporary philosophy, and even those who maybe say are consequentialist want to discuss virtues in some way in their ethical theories. But you might have this question in the back of your head when I talk about goodness and badness and all of these theories, which is like, isn't all of this ethics stuff kind of bullshit? And if you think the answer to that question is yes,
who thinks that? Isn't ethics bullshit? It's like, I hope not. Why am I like that? That is not how I should have been on screen for that long. How long were you guys just gonna let me look like that? Like a fool. Like a ding-dong. I need another way of having my different PNGs show up, because having them on my keyboard is very clearly causing issues. I wish you could separate like the keys for your numbers into like two separate things, so that I can just press the top ones rather than the one on the side, you know? And then have that be how my freaking PNG changes around. But yeah, who out here is thinking ethics is bullshit?
You're probably a moral nihilist. Now, when some people start to doubt ethics, they can go in two directions. Sometimes they become subjectivist. They say that ethics is just a matter of subjectivity. What's right for you isn't right for me, something like this. I think this is the wrong path to go down. Subjectivism is very rarely taken seriously in philosophy. I think that it's basically a cop-out, and it doesn't actually wrestle with any of the major problems with realism. The more radical step is to become a moral nihilist and say that there is no such thing as rightness or wrongness. Now, there are many different strands of moral nihilism. One name that gets brought up quite a bit if you talk about nihilism would be Friedrich Nietzsche. But the question of whether or not Nietzsche is a proper nihilist is actually quite contested. Nietzsche was certainly highly critical of conventional morality, especially any morality that was inherited from Christianity, which he thought was a worldview that was dead, was intellectually bankrupt. I'm actually working on a video about Nietzsche and the death of God and all of this stuff, so you could look out for that eventually. But whether or not Nietzsche is a nihilist is actually a matter for some debate among scholars. The question is, when he says that he wants to move beyond good and evil, is he abandoning moral categories, or is he abandoning those specific categories that we've inherited from Christianity? A more contemporary form of nihilism actually comes from the philosopher J.L. Mackie, who wrote this really nice little book called Ethics, Inventing Right and Wrong. At the beginning of that book, Mackie gives this argument
he
based
says.
on what he calls on queerness. At the time, Mackie meant queerness as strangeness. It was a very common term for something that was strange. Obviously, we say the word queer to mean something a little bit different nowadays, so we'll say the argument from strangeness just to be clear. Essentially, Mackie observes that if moral properties exist, they are the kind of properties that sort of lead to objective prescriptions of action. But no other properties that we know of actually lead to these kinds of objective prescriptions. And so in this way, they are very strange properties. And he says that they are so strange, in fact, that we would be better off just abandoning them in our ontology and say that there is no such thing as an objective prescription. Notice what we've done here, though. We've actually left the realm of ethics. We're no longer talking about whether or not particular actions are right or wrong, or whether or not we are good or bad human beings. And now we're asking foundational questions about ethics. We call this field meta-ethics.
Meta-ethics. Well, how are you doing? I am certainly doing. I am certainly confused, Pine. I'm a confused guy trying to understand very, very hard to understand things. Writing notes. I'm not sure if I'm gonna be doing this again, though. Yeah. Most of this, I've just been quiet and trying to, just listen to what this guy is saying. How have you been doing, Pine? You've been exploring the new season for Sky today? Oh. And how's that been going? Meta-ethics. Why did I write metaphysics again? Meta-ethics. There we go. Okay, what did he say earlier? Foundations of ethics? I'm assuming that's going to be the definition anyhow. 4 new emotes, 2 more wing light locations, and so much more to this season. I'll have to hop on soon. Actually, when did I, in my schedule, put Sky to play for this week? I don't know if I changed it. I think I changed it to Saturday instead of Friday. But I might hop on, after stream to check some of that stuff out on my own anyhow today. 4 new emotes, like they didn't have enough.
Very roughly, meta-ethics is the field that asks all those meta questions about ethics, about the language of ethics, about the epistemology of ethics, and about the metaphysics of ethics. So a field that is closely related to ethics is the field of political philosophy. While traditionally ethics focuses on individuals.
5 out of the 6 things you said were in wind paths? Oh, okay. Easy enough, just head to wind paths then. You know what? That makes everything fine. And then, all just in one little location except for one thing. Which I imagine is going to be the second wind light. Wind light? Wing light. Not wind. The emotes and the wing light are in wind path, and the other wing light are on Isle. I see.
Political philosophy tries to actually deal with human beings at a larger scale. So one of the major issues that we find in political philosophy is the problem of justice, which is closely related to the distribution of wealth. Some philosophers have held that there is a moral imperative for the state to redistribute wealth to make it at least somewhat more
ethics
equal. And other philosophers have argued that there's actually a moral imperative to not do so, because to do so would infringe on certain rights that individuals have. So to see the differences in these positions, we're going to consider 2 philosophers really briefly. Those John Rawls and Robert Nozick. These are both 20th century political philosophers.
I did not hear of either of these guys ever.
Because they were actually both at Harvard's philosophy department at the same time, and they came to such radically different conclusions about what justice demanded. Nozick develops his theory of justice in a book called Anarchy, State, and Utopia. And here, Nozick is developing a very libertarian view of justice. Nozick's theory is sometimes called the entitlement theory. And for our purposes, what's most interesting, though, is that it's a historical theory.
Justice
so what it does is it says that if we want to figure out if our current
big
state of affairs is
deal.
just, we have to go and trace back all of the steps in history through which property has been acquired and transferred, and when something unjust has happened, has it been rectified? Basically, to see if our current situation is just, we have to look backward and see how did we get here. This is contrasted with Rawls's theory, which he outlines in A Theory of Justice. Rawls bases his theory on something called the veil of ignorance. Now, under this thought experiment, we imagine a group of people, and this group of people are deliberating about what they think a just society would look like. But here's the big catch. They don't know who they're going to be in that society. So they don't know if they'll be men or women, what religion they'll be, if they'll be rich or poor, how smart they'll be, or anything like that. And Rawls says, in that situation, what sort of a society would we prefer? The result is a society that is very different than Nozick's. So Nozick is totally okay with vast amounts of inequality as long as they come about in a just manner. Rawls, on the other hand, thinks that we're going to have a principle that says that all inequality has to be justifiable to those who are least well off. And he thinks that's going to mean we're going to live in a vastly more equal society if we live in accord with these principles. Nozick really is basing a lot of his stuff on property rights, while Rawls thinks that even though you're going to have a lot of rights in his society, but perhaps even more rights than we currently enjoy, property rights are something that could be overridden in the name of justice. Another foundational issue in philosophy is democracy.
Oh, geez, not democracy. I feel like that's like the big O in philosophy. The fact that this has a section of its own, just called Philosophers Against Democracy, it's a little worrying. With 2 new Winglight locations, that brings you to 186 Winglight as of right now. Is that even... I was gonna say, like, are those 2 extra Winglights even enough to give you, like, an extra little flight thing? I don't think so, right? Because there's only a set amount. Ow, my arm. 200 is your next level. That's a long way to go. For another flap, yeah, another flap. So now you're at 186. They still need to add 14 more. I almost failed there. 14 more if you want to achieve that additional flap of wings.
Take for granted that democracy is a good thing. We're happy that we live in democratic societies, and many of our philosophers take for granted that whatever the ideal society is, it's going to be somewhat democratic. But actually, in the history of philosophy, I think this is a minority position. So ancient Greece might have been the place where democracy was born, but both Plato and Aristotle were anti-democratic thinkers. In Plato's Republic, he gives a theory where he prefers the rule by a kind of elite, the philosopher kings. They're intellectually gifted, and their job is to look after the people of the city. And Aristotle actually classifies different kinds of governments, and he classifies some of them as deviant. And on that list of deviant governments are democracies. The worry that Plato and Aristotle both had, I think, is that if you believe in majority rule, you're actually allowing for the tyranny of the majority. Though there is also a kind of elitism both to Plato and Aristotle and many other anti-democratic thinkers. They just think that the people in general are not smart enough or capable enough to rule themselves.
I mean, are they wrong though? Like, you know, sometimes I go outside and I'm like, damn, people stupid. So maybe they were right. maybe they were right.
This is also another case where you see some parallels with Chinese philosophy. It's taken for granted in a lot of classical Chinese philosophy that there will be a ruling bureaucratic elite or a king who has the mandate of heaven. The issue of democracy isn't really even on the table, so much so that many classical Chinese thinkers aren't even arguing against democracy directly. Another sort of critique of democracy that you find comes from the anarchist tradition. Anarchists historically understood democracy to be a form of majority rule. and this was just another form of tyranny for them. Other anarchists have not been as critical of democracy. In fact, they've sometimes argued that democratic states are not democratic enough, and that truly the most democratic states would be properly anarchist. To understand this, you have to go a little bit far into anarchist theory, and I think that's a little bit too much of a deep dive for a video like this.
Oh, geez. You've
So I
got
like
into the...
Stoicism.
Oh, I clicked on another video on accident. Okay, what have I written so far down? I don't even think I've written enough, actually. It feels like I haven't written enough. So out of everything that I've written down in my notes, it's mostly just definition on some things. It's like critical thinking, freaking metaphysics, realism, idealism, deflammatory theory of truth. I didn't really get to write anything down for universality, but I feel like that one's straightforward. Something about platonic forms to things that are physical. Then there's nominalists, Buddhist, epistemology, the skeptics, ethics, and what that is, consequentialists, hedonism, utilitarianism, and how that's basically a mixture of just consequentialism and hedonism. Deontologists, who just... I think my note on that needs to be refined, because I think this is somehow a little wrong. Virtue ethics, moral nihilism, then there's meta ethics, and then the political philosophy. I feel like virtue ethics, it's like a decent place to start off if I want to try to... Because I feel like I understand that a little bit more straightforward than all the other stuff. I feel like that's like more, not plain, but has more practical things that can help me understand just what the hell they're talking about. A lot of this other stuff feels like it requires a little bit more, what's even the word? What's the word I'd want to use? Ow, and why is my head pounding? I don't like that my head is doing that. Cease that action, brain. I need it to function. Forget it. I forgot what the word even was. And my neck still feels like it needs to be just very quickly snapped to the side. Like virtues, I feel like I've watched or at least heard a lot about virtues and whatnot. And they say it started with like the Greeks a lot, so maybe there is more I know about it than I realize at the moment, or maybe there's a lot less that I know. I mean, a lot of the people who the guy mentioned, you know, I was like, oh, I know that guy, I know this guy, or of them, I should say. Not really their whole shtick. Feels like there's a little too much when it comes to each individual guy that was pointed out in that video. But at least I recognize a lot more names than I listed out in the beginning of the stream, which was like 4. I listed out 4. And there was a couple more that I knew of. It's just hard to remember that many names. And then, yeah, there was the whole thing about Nietzsche and whether he was truly a nihilist or not. I've heard of those, like, of that being a field of discussion amongst the nihilists. I feel like getting into political theory is a little too much of a minefield, so I'll try to ignore that for a while. Man, I really wish I had some medicine. This headache is annoying. But yeah, I did exactly what I feared I was gonna do during that entire thing, which was just be quiet. That doesn't make for good content. But then again, if I try to entrust the learning of this knowledge off stream, it's never gonna happen. And that's the little trouble I have. If I'm not doing it on stream, it's not being done. But if I do it on stream, it's just gonna be a lot of me being quiet. Hmm. Let me look up like a better definition for universality. Universality. Hmm. Fact or condition being universal. There we go. And then what was the other thing? I wanted a better definition for the ontologists. Okay, the ontological, pertaining to, obviously, okay. In moral philosophy, the ontological ethics, or the ontology, is the normative ethical theory that the morality of an action should be based on whether the action itself is right or wrong under a series of rules or principles. Okay. I'm gonna copy that and just kind of paste it right into my notes. And I'm gonna freaking use the bathroom, so I'll be right back. Alrighty, I've returned. And my brain is still no better, but that's alright. I did say I was gonna try and check out whatever recommended little book recommendations that guy had in his link. So I gotta actually go check those. See if there's anything there that's like understandable. Okay, a lot of these are like Amazon links, which I guess makes sense. There's a couple of other videos here. Seven philosophy books for beginners, and then the first 5 philosophy books you should read, and then how to read and understand hard books. That one might be very important for me. I don't know why today of all days I get this headache. And caffeine does not seem to be helping me in the way that it usually does. Which is sad. Because I don't want to cut stream short. That's the thing. I don't want to cut stream short. Because then that just means that most of this video, most of this VOD, I should say, is just me watching something and then barely commenting on it. Maybe I should have been writing down names as well. You went from Forest being on 56% to 90%? In what regard? In what regard do you mean that? You mean like the constellation for the place? Ow. Yes, okay. How do you manage like this today? You did that like right now? That was quick. I guess you just never got around to it until right now. You spent over 100 candles. That is gonna take you a while to get back. But I suppose you do have plenty of candles anyhow, so... Does it hurt to part ways with 100 candles? It would hurt me to part ways with 100 candles, even if I had many more. Yay. This video is also a year old. I guess that's alright. Guide to reading and understanding books, blah 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 blah. Different types of non-fiction. And then there's also another video on note-taking, which, you know, may also be something I need to watch. As it turns out, Yolotl is not very smart, and may need to learn how to learn. Let me see if there's anybody on. I guess we can just talk for the rest of this stream. But about what? And whom? And when? And there's nobody that I know of that's streaming right now, in terms of who I follow. Interesting. Thought there would be at least one fellow. Let me see anything going on in terms of the dramatics of the internet. Okay, that's a funny little reaction photo to what somebody said. I'm just gonna click around. I'm just gonna doom scroll for a little bit. Just a little bit of doom scrolling. A little bit of doom scrolling never hurt anyone. I forgot that people are now out here making little VTuber trading card things. I mean, there's like the big ones, and now I think this other guy's making his own smaller thing. Hmm. Man, really nothing interesting has been going on today? Come on. There's usually some outcry or another. But there's nothing. I see nothing. Nada. Oh, there's more about people complaining about TwitchCon. There is that. I suppose that is some amount of drama. Although personally, I'm not caring much for it. Not outside of the fact that I feel like so many things have happened when it comes to TwitchCon that it's just like, yeah. Like, I feel bad for the people, but it's like, do I care that much anymore? It's like, it's happened so many times. Why do people keep going to them? You know, while I was in the bathroom, I kind of thought about, for like a little bit, you know, because I wasn't in the bathroom for too long, about whether I even want to continue streaming on Twitch. I might switch over to something different. Probably YouTube. I still haven't ever tried to dual stream or anything like that. But if I do decide to just leave for like one side alone, it's probably gonna be YouTube. Make that 91% now. Nice, Pine. Nice. Nothing from this person that's interesting. What about this other person? What? When does NASA... Okay, no, that's a lie. This is likely what they call temporary or quasi-moons. Earth's gravity can temporarily capture asteroids. These are not permanent moons and will eventually break free from the Earth's gravity. Huh. You were over 310 candles. You are now at 163 candles. You are becoming one of us, one of the pores. Oh, jeez. You will be back at 200 tomorrow. I can see that. I can see that. You know, all the little nooks and crannies of this game. So it would not surprise me. Hmm. Some big online personality got doxxed a while ago. Huh. That's something. And nothing more from this person. Okay. So basically, I got nothing. I got nothing to yap on about. We still got. I'm gonna go for like 30 more minutes. Then call it a day. Brains pounding like a drum. I really should have more people on my little thing here. Let me see. What about the people I follow? They post anything cool at least? Some random Pokemon art. Horse. Horse stable. Who the hell is this? Damn. One person who was making an art book got their art book funded in 1 hour. That's impressive. More Silk Song related art. Some of this is actually pretty cool. Let me switch over my profile here. To this one. Let me see. I guess I should check out what that guy's doing. Why am I getting random clips on YouTube from freaking Kanan? I guess that's a fan channel, but surprised I'm getting those popping up on my thing. I don't even watch that guy. Ay, 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 ay. Devin Nash, da, 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 da. What should I do? Hmm. Look at random cats. That's a good option. Why did this person name their cat Scarpetka? That has to mean something. Surely in another language, but it's a funny name. Scarpetka. I do have to decide whether I want to buy some games because Halloween's almost around, October's almost over, and I didn't really play that many horror games. So I have to get around to actually buying at least one and actually playing it. Sorrow, hail to thee. How are you doing? I'm just spending these last 20 minutes scrolling around because my brain is hurting. You are tired? I'm so sorry to hear that. I was tired too. I didn't sleep all that much. I slept like a couple hours, did stuff that I had to do in the morning, and then decided to take like an hour nap before stream. It didn't really work as well as I wanted it to, but that's alright. Okay, it's not alright. I wish it worked better. But beggars can't be choosers, as they say. And now I'm just doom scrolling. You kept waking up every hour during the night? That fucking sucks, Pine. I'm sorry to hear that. That happens to me too a lot of the time. I'll just wake up for no reason. Just wake up. And then I just have to turn over and close my eyes and wake up again at some other time. Doesn't happen maybe not every hour for me, but definitely at least like 4 times in the 5 hours I get to sleep. If I were to try and sleep at an appropriate time. Well, isn't this a wild thing to post? What the fuck? Random hot dog man with with a hat, backwards, sunglasses, and he's riding a skateboard. That's the coolest thing I've seen all day. Who the hell did this to this dog? What is this? Where did this image come from? Hold on, I gotta show this. Just what the hell? What the hell they do to my boy? What did they do to this poor dog? Let me see. Look at this. they they got my boy going to school. He don't look at his face. Look at his little face. He don't want to go to school. He doesn't even know where school is. And the Spider-Man backpack. I don't know what that reminds me of that other dog. The one with the sunglasses and the hat. LMAO, that dog does not look happy, right? He don't want to learn shit. He just wants to be a dog. Let my boy free. What a hound. What a hound. I hope he at the very least was given a snack. A little treat. Ooh, brain. Maybe I should have gone and gotten myself medicine. I should have done that earlier. Hopefully this freaking headache goes away in like an hour. I do not want to be dealing with this for the rest of the day. Especially when I go to sleep. If not, I'm gonna search for the one Tylenol pill I know is somewhere in one of the kitchen's drawers or shelves or whatever you want to call them. Cupboards, that's what they're called. There's one left, I know there is, and if it's not there where I think it is, I might crash out. I kind of want to toss a pumpkin at myself. Have I said that before? Probably with other objects, but I'm not sure I've said that with a pumpkin yet. Pumpkins are rather hollow. I mean, they are hard. Hard but hollow. So would it hurt to just get one thrown at you? Probably. But maybe if you sort of like headbutt it as it comes at you, maybe it'll just like cave in. Or something, I don't know. Pumpkins are heavy, it will hurt. Well, I mean, you never know until you try, right? But you're probably right. You are probably correct. They are hollow, but they have really thick walls sometimes, so it may not break on impact. But that would depend on the velocity, no? Velocity probably matters in this. Ow. I don't think my brain's gonna shell out. I gotta eat a banana. I miss my bananas. There was only 5, and I got to eat like 2, and now I want more. I miss having potassium and other banana-related nutrients. It tastes so good. Why does banana taste so good? Why is that like one of the fruits of all time? You eat a lot of apples, and one of your housemates was judging you for having a fruit bowl full of a dozen or so apples. I mean, apples alone Listen, I'm a fan of the green apples, but like just a fruit bowl of apples, is it even a fruit bowl anymore if it's just apples? It's just an apple bowl if no different fruits, because fruit bowl implies there's variety. But if there's no variety and it's one kind of fruit, then it's just bowl of insert fruit here. I suppose you could argue that the differences between apples would count as a disparity, as a kind of difference, and therefore fruit bowl. In your defense, you usually put bananas and oranges in there as well, and general snacks sometimes. What do you mean by general snacks in your fruit bowl? This has just turned into an interrogation. I'm joking. I jest. Breadsticks? Bread. Sticks. Now I want like garlic bread. I want garlic breadsticks now. I'm hungry. The bowl has 2 tiers, so you put fruit on the bottom and other snacks on top. I have never heard. I mean, I guess that reminds me of that cup that has the sort of lid with the straw hole through it, but the lid is almost like a small bowl thing in and of itself, so you could put like little snacks in there. That's what that reminds me of when you said your bowl has 2 tiers. How would that even work, actually? A bowl with 2 tiers. I guess it would be. Is it like a small lid thing that goes kind of like in the middle of the bowl, or is it split in half? It's got something going down the center so that you can split your snack in half, or your bowl, I should say. I mean, you say bowl. It's more of a metal wire basket. Ah, I see. Now I kind of want to bite on metal wire. You're making me have all kinds of cravings today, Sorrow, and I do not have an answer to why. Metal wire bowl basket thing. You know what pissed me off, actually? The little store-bought yogurts that have the granolas in like a separate kind of container that's like a part of the lid. Because every time you try to open that thing without spilling all the granola all over the place, guess what you end up doing? Spilling the granola all over the fucking place. I despise that to an extent that I cannot comprehend. It makes me want to bite myself whenever I manage to spill it. And I try so hard not to spill any granola. And I just end up spilling, like, even if I spill one little granola thing, I'm like, damn, it's time to tweak out. It's time to just stare at the countertop for 2 minutes precisely and contemplate which part of my body needs to be bitten off. Because why did they make such a useless form of containing granola? Like, that, just have it be a separate thing that doesn't require you to open the damn lid to the yogurt itself in order to get access to it. You've never bought one of those simply because you look at them and get confused? Yeah, I would say they're not worth it, but they are technically cheaper than buying yogurt and then granola, right? Because that's probably going to cost you like close to $20. And also because you're very picky about both granola and yogurt. Fair enough. You would think there would be one type of granola. There is not. There is many types of granola. Some is just granola. Some is granola with raisins. Some of it is honey covered. I'd just be mad. Maddening, I should say. Ow. What in the world? What a random piece of little fan art. The only yogurt you really eat are the corner ones, where you dip the fruit jam or the chocolate bits into the yogurt and mix it as much as you want. I think I know what you're talking about. The corner ones, though. Referring to them as the corner ones is a little confusing. Oh, you mean the ones that have the other stuff like the chocolate like in that little bit of corner, kind of separate from the rest of the yogurt? I've not seen a lot of those. Honestly, that's the way all yogurts should do it. All of them. But it's a shame they don't have them. I think they don't have them where I am. Maybe. Or maybe I'm just not paying attention when I go to... to be fair, I don't go grocery shopping that often. Not all that often, not myself. I usually just put away the groceries and carry them inside. That's my task. You call them corner because they're literally called corner on the packaging? Fair. Fair. It's my fault. I'm ignorant. I'm an ignorant bitch. That is on me. You are correct. If that is what they're called, then that is what they're called. Dude, my stomach is rumbling right now. I want a strawberry, even though I know strawberries don't taste like strawberry flavor. What is the flavor of a strawberry? Have you ever thought about that? Like, every strawberry tastes different. Therefore, there cannot be a universal strawberry flavor. Some are sweet, some are sour. Some are just weird. And that's just it. Some of them are just weird. So I do not even know how I would describe the flavor of strawberry other than sometimes sweet, sometimes sour, sometimes just weird. But even the sweet ones aren't really all that sweet, Now I'm reminding you that you want to buy an ice cream maker so you can make random fruit ice creams whenever you want. That awesome. That just sounds awesome. That sounds awesome as hell. You probably would need like creamer or something of that kind. I don't know how that would work, but that does sound cool. And I hope that if you do find one, that it genuinely tastes like ice cream. I would be very disappointed if I bought a thing for a set amount of money and then boom, it just does not produce what you think it produces. Sometimes perfume smells good, and it makes you want to have a nibble of all the liquid inside, but it all just tastes like not food, because that's what it's not. It's not food. The recipe you normally use is 300 milligrams of cream, 500 grams of chopped or mashed fruit. Did I say milligrams? Milliliters. Milliliters. 500 grams of chopped or mashed fruit, and add a few teaspoons of sugar depending on taste. I will never put this information to use. It is nice to have, though. Nice to have in my back pocket. I will remember like half of this, and I won't even remember in which form. It'll probably be like 300 grams of cream and 500 milliliters of chopped fruit. Which doesn't even make sense. Because grams is weight, and milliliters is not weight. It is for liquid. Volume? Actually, I don't know what counts as a... What the hell is a milligram? Milliliter or whatever. Milliliter. What are we measuring? Is it volume? I feel like I learned about this so long ago, and now this information, I don't even know why it is the way it is. Maybe that doesn't matter. Maybe I shouldn't think about that. It just is. Very convenient because cream usually comes in 300 milliliter pots, so you can just put the whole pot in. Oh, that's nice. And convenient, as you said. Very convenient. Oh yeah, that's not all that big. It's pretty much like normal. Liters and milliliters are measuring volume, usually of liquids. There we go. You have reaffirmed my knowledge. Let's see, what time is it? Well, I suppose it's been 2 hours, and my brain is going crazy, and my tummy is going crazy, because it wants nutrition. So I shall bid thee farewell. I hope you all have a great rest of your mornings, afternoons, evenings, and nights, wherever and whenever you are. May the gods bless you. May the stars shine in your honor. Thank you for for entertaining me here in my random little blabberings. It was a pleasure as always. Take care of yourselves and have a good one. Bye bye.